medieval history students. My name is Lucretia Heloisa, and welcome to one of my favorite topics, castles. Today, we will be looking at some of the features of a castle and how the castle is both defended and attacked. Please take notes on the paper titled Castle Video Notes and bring them to class with you tomorrow. And with that, here we go. When you think of the Middle Ages, you might imagine knights, lords and ladies, jousting competitions, and bloody battles, probably taking place in or around a castle. Castles were important staging points for conquests and defenses of territories in medieval times. The designs and constructions of these fortresses vary greatly, and many survive today. Today, we think of castles in a very romanticized way. However, in medieval times, castles served primarily a military purpose. They housed armies and acted as garrisons that controlled a particular territory. Many castles were part of a fortified town and sheltered the surrounding villagers in times of war and siege. As time went on, castles also became residences for lords and kings. Castle designs changed over time to keep up with the improvements in siege technology. Castles also had to provide necessities like sanitation, fresh water, and cooking areas, which were especially important when the castle was under siege. With this in mind, let's look at the major defensive features of a castle. First, there was a moat, a large ditch or trench surrounding the outer castle wall. It was a castle's first line of defense. The moat could be filled with water, or it could be a dry moat that had been lined with wooden spikes. It usually had a drawbridge across it that was drawn up when the castle was under attack. Many moats were also dump sites for garbage and sewage. Not all castles had moats. Some castles were built high up on the bedrock and didn't need them. After the moat, there are the outer walls. The outer curtain wall was high, thick, made of stone or brick. Walls could range from 6 to 10 meters high and 1.5 to 8 meters thick. In many castles, wall thickness varied according to the area's perceived vulnerability. Most outer walls had battlements on them as well. There were several kinds of battlements. First, there were crenellations. Crenellations were rectangular blocks alternated with openings across the top of a wall or tower. Soldiers could hide behind the blocks and shoot through the openings. There were also walkways. Some walls had walkways built into the stone, while others had wooden walkways on the inside of the wall where the soldiers could stand guard and defend the walls during battle. Castles might also have something called hoardings. Hoardings were covered wooden overhangs that ran along the top of a wall. Hoardings had holes in the floor from which soldiers could shoot arrows or dump various objects like rocks, hot tar, boiling water, or hot oil on top of attackers. Finally, all castles had arrow loops. Arrow loops were narrow slits or openings in walls and hoardings through which archers and crossbowmen could fire arrows. Many arrow loops were wider on the inside and tapered toward the outside of the wall. This design gave the archer a wider field of view. The castles had other defenses as well. One of these defenses was the tower. These tall, round or square structures were built into the length or corners of the castle walls. They were usually higher than the walls and constructed in the same manner. Rounded towers projecting out from the wall or at a corner gave a better view to the defenders. The walls usually had arrow loops and the tops could have hoardings or be crenellated or roofed. Gatehouses were inside the wall and connected with the bridge over the moat. But they were more than just doorways. The gates were usually long tunnels with arrow-looped towers at either side of the entrance. The outer opening of the gatehouse tunnel was covered by a grated wooden or iron gate called a portcullis. Soldiers could raise the portcullis with a winch and lower it while under attack so defenders could shoot arrows through the openings. In the ceiling of the gatehouse tunnel, there were openings called murder holes. through which defenders could drop objects and hot liquid. The sides of the tunnel also had arrow loops. Finally, the gatehouse had a heavy wooden door at the inner opening, which soldiers could shut and lock with braces. With all of these protections, you might think the castles were indestructible. But that was not the case at all. There were several ways to lay siege to a castle. The first was a strategy called surround and starve. The invading army surrounded the castle and cut off its supply of food and water with the hope of starving the defenders. In an effort to spread disease among the defenders, the invaders could use their catapults to send dead or diseased animals and human bodies over the castle walls. They could also lob fiery projectiles to wreak havoc inside the castle. This siege method was actually preferred because the invading army might negotiate the castle's surrender with minimal casualties. But it took months to years to work, and the invading army had to be very well supplied with food and water for the duration of the siege. The second siege strategy was to scale the walls. The invaders would set huge scaling ladders against the castle's outer curtain wall. Invading soldiers would climb the ladders to gain access to the castle. However, the climbers were vulnerable to arrow fire and objects thrown at them from the battlements on the castle walls. Defenders could also push the ladder off the walls. Alternatively, the invaders built large wooden siege towers and filled them with soldiers. Other soldiers would wheel the towers to the base of the curtain wall. Soldiers in the top of the tower would lower a plank, storm across it onto the battlements, and hope to outnumber the defenders. The third strategy was to ram the doors. If an invading army could break down the castle gate, they could enter the castle relatively easily. So they'd use battering rams or large wooden logs to pound against the gate or even the castle walls and eventually break it. Some battering rams were covered to shield the invading soldiers from the defenders' arrow fire and thrown objects. Sometimes the wooden castle gates were set on fire to weaken them. The final siege technique was called bring down the walls. If an invading army could create a breach in a wall, they could enter the castle in a less defended place. Invaders smashed the walls with battering rams and launched heavy stone projectiles and flaming projectiles at and over the walls. They used catapults, trebuchets, and ballistae. Another way to bring down castle walls was to mine under them. The invading army would dig tunnels under the castle walls and brace them with timber supports. Once they dug the tunnel far enough to the other side, they would set the tunnel on fire. The timber supports would be destroyed and the wall above the tunnel would collapse. So, medieval historians, now that you are a castle connoisseur and know lots of information about how to both defend a castle and how to attack a castle, please think about the following. If you were a medieval king, would you rather be a castle defender or a castle attacker? Why would you make that choice? Bring your notes to class and be prepared to answer this question. Until then, this is Lucretia Heloisa bidding you farewell.